1 to 44, and then All India Radio advertised some higher grade posts in the news division, and I applied for one of them, and I came here in 1944 when I was selected for that job.
But Lahore was very much your home city.
That was my home city. In fact, the first time I travelled out of Lahore, the first time I travelled out of Lahore was to Delhi during my college days, and then again later when I started to work here. I had not been to any other part of India till that time.
Can I ask you when you were born?
1921.
So you were in your early 20s when you came to Delhi.
That's right. Yeah.
And then with the storm clouds looming, you went back to Lahore.
No, it was not because of the storm clouds. It was because, yes, they were looming all right, but it's not because of that I went there. Round about the 9th or 10th of August, I finally got the reply from my parents who were in Lahore saying that they were not leaving. I'd been urging them to leave Lahore, to come out to this side, and they said no. At that time the rumour was that Lahore will remain with India and Calcutta will go to Pakistan. And I said there's no such fact at all, and I would be amazed if that was so. Nobody in his senses would equate Lahore with Calcutta as part of the country that is coming into being. So this is not going to happen, and you must come away because things are already very bad indeed. And I said they are all going to get worse. More than that, it'll be very difficult to leave Lahore unless you do it in the next couple of days. And they were hesitating. In fact, on the 10th or so, as I said, practically they refused when I telephoned again. So I said, no, I must get there and persuade them to leave. Now, fortunately, it had been their practice to leave every summer for a couple of months in the hills and then get back to Lahore after the summer was tapering off. And that year, although normally they would leave mid-July, early July to go to the hills, but that year, because of the disturbances in Lahore, they are not gone. So when I went there, the argument that fell in place was that, look, you always go away to the hills. You say that Lahore is going to remain with India. All right, then you will come back here. But you must go to the hills as you used to do, because it was very hot and circumstances had made it even worse. And that persuaded them to come away for a time. And to find a place at some hill station, because we were very late, I was very late in approaching any housing agents at that time. Normally people make up all these arrangements in Lahore. They would do by about June, mid-June, early June, and nothing of that had been done. So I went to the Civil Indemnity Gazette and I said, please find for me a house to which I can hire for my parents to go.
But this was when you were when you had got back to Lahore.
When I'd gone back to Lahore.
But how did you travel from Delhi to Lahore?
Travelling from Delhi to Lahore, that is travelling from Lahore, Delhi railway station up to Lahore railway station, was not a great problem. There had been many attacks on railways, on trains, a lot of casualties, huge numbers of casualties in fact, but the trains were still running.
But who was on the train with you? It would have been mainly Muslim refugees heading to Pakistan.
Mostly those. And in fact, some of the people I knew in my rail compartment were refugees who were leaving Delhi. Others were people like me wanting to get somewhere close to Amritsar, from where they could go deep across and bring their relatives, etc., back to this side of the border. Because there were many people in Lahore and elsewhere in West Punjab at that time who believed that no, Lahore is going to remain here and there was no reason to come away. And so their relatives, their descendants who were here in Delhi went across to try and bring them out, the same thing as I was doing. And then it only, the train that I was traveling by was reasonably safe. There was nothing very much happened. But only when I got to Lahore that the enormity of the scene dawned upon me. Not that Delhi was at all peaceful either. There had been very violent clashes in Delhi, lots of deaths, but nothing like what was witnessed in Lahore. Fires all over the place, from the railway station to my house, which is across the city. And traveling through the city, it was easy to see. You could not help but see how terrible it must have been for them.
How did you travel across Lahore?
Across in a tonga. At the railway station, you know what a tonga is. At the railway station, again, this is another thing that dawned on me only when I got there. I didn't realize that not many people would be willing to ferry you across where you wanted to go. So I had to persuade a Tongawala to go, to take me to my house. And when I told him where the house was, he slinked away. He said, "No, that's too much. I'm not going that way," because between the railway station and my house, there would have been at least 4 different alterations between predominant Muslim and predominantly Hindu localities. They had been traditionally so. It had nothing to do with the partition, but it was easy to guess that they would have been affected by the partition. But affected how badly, that is what I found difficult to realize until I got there. And that was these were Hindu localities set on fire by the Muslims, Muslim localities set on fire by Hindus. And then my own house was at the edge of a predominantly Muslim locality. And the only people that I could, that were suggested to me by my newspaper, to go and contact for getting a house, were in this Muslim locality. So again, I had to travel through the same alterations between Hindus and Muslims in the Muslim localities with the same scenery.
And what did you see? You say it was bad, but how bad?
Buildings on fire. You could see dead bodies by the side of the road. The way went past a college where I had studied, and out of curiosity, I thought I would just make a detour there, as a short detour, to see what had happened to the college where I had studied. And that was a scene of massacres. It was a college named after Dayal Singh, who was a great philanthropist. And in the compound, the forecourt, or front compound of that college, I could see people who had been dead. And so I didn't go in, but I just saw this and continued on to Lahore, to my house.
And these were men, women, children?
Mostly grown. I didn't see any children, but grown people. In fact, some of the stories that came out afterwards of the brutality of it, the inhumanity of it, seemed to me to be exaggerated. The killings were mostly of grown people of one community fighting grown people of another community. Yes, some women were very grievously victims of the same thing, but grown women, not children. So I didn't, to answer your question, in that college compound also, I didn't see any children. But on the road, yes, they might have been with their parents when they were attacked, and therefore there were children as well as grown people together. And absolute no sign of any kind of commercial activity. The shops were closed, the cinemas were closed, the traffic on the roads was minimal, as one would imagine, that sort of thing. But as I got closer to my house, it got worse, because there's a mixed locality. and a mixed locality is always at the receiving end from both sides. So it got worse there. But anyhow, when I left Delhi to bring them out, or when I got there to persuade them to go to the hills, I hadn't imagined that it was that bad. Although in Delhi itself I had the experience of, when I was working on All India Radio, I used to have to go early in the morning to sometimes on morning shifts, and on the way one could see what had happened there the previous night.
Including bodies in Delhi?
In Delhi, near Parliament House, which is very near All India Radio.
So who was it you were trying to get out from Lahore? It was your parents?
My parents. My parents.
And when you found them, how were they?
No, they were all right. There was no, in that immediate vicinity, there had not been any trouble. But they were adamant that they would stay and not leave Lahore, because they were what you might call among the elders of the locality. And my father said, if I go, then and a few others like me leave, then everyone would think that the elders are going away and leaving us behind. So they didn't want to do that. But anyhow, the argument that prevailed ultimately was, you go there, don't take your belongings and things other than those you would take in any case while going away for a couple of weeks to the hill station, and then you come back here if you are able to come back. If not, then and then of course they never went back.
So where did they head to? Which hill station did you take them to?
Dalhousie. Dalhousie was the favourite hill station of people in Lahore, and previous years also they had gone there. And when I went to the CNM Gazette office to look up any advertisements, etc., from previous issues, they found some in Dalhousie. So I said, that's best, because that's that station they know.
And did you get out of Lahore okay to Dalhousie?
Yes. In fact, when I left here, when I left Delhi on about the 10th or 9th or 10th of August, I had already accepted to be part of the team of All India Radio, which would be on duty on August 13th and 14th, 13th, 14th, 15th at Parliament House.
In Delhi?
In Delhi. So it's all that happened within about the 10th of 9th or 10th of August, and the 12th when I left Lahore and got here on the 13th.
So you were at Parliament House?
Yeah, I was not at Parliament House. I was doing the news bulletin, but then on the 14th afternoon, I went to Parliament House. My duty was over. I went to Parliament House, and I was there on that midnight. I watched that midnight session in Central Hall of Parliament.
You were actually inside the room?
In the Central Hall. The Central Hall of Parliament is a very tall building, and in the press gallery is in the upper reaches of that auditorium, and I was in the press gallery there watching it.
And that was when Nehru made his famous speech?
Famous speech, yes.
When you were looking down on that, what did you see, and what were your memories of the occasion?
My memory of the occasion is much less that of Nehru making that famous speech, much more that of Pandit Omkarnath Thakur, one of our great singers, classical music singers, who sang the song with which the midnight was inaugurated.
Which song was that? Was it Sare Jahan Se Acha?
No. It was Hari Om. Hari Om is a famous classical music song, and he sang that. And Nehru's speech I heard, of course. The occasion was spread out below you. But what stood out in my mind was this very oceanic voice of this man reverberating under that dome.
You had in the previous week seen the sour side of independence. What was your feeling at the midnight hour? What was your own sentiment?
I would say that long before the August 14th came, it had been clear to us that this is going to happen. Now, either that was because we were in Delhi, more in touch with the political gossip and that was going on, and watching it at closer quarters, or whatever reason, there was very little doubt in our minds that this would have, that independence would be, this would be the Independence Night. Now, the feeling that went about afterwards in gossipy versions of the events of that time, that India woke to unwillingly and unknowingly into a partition. That's not so. The partition was, it was known that it would come, it was known that it would be, these would be the demarcations and so on. But what took everybody by surprise was the sheer ferocity of it. And that part of it, the ferocity of it, which, as I said, was my dominant impression of those days, came to me much more in Delhi, much less in Delhi than when I went to Lahore and saw those familiar streets and roads caught up in the conflagration.
Did you, for All India Radio, cover the kafilas that were moving to and fro in the months after?
No, for the reason that, first of all, I was much more involved with the political side of the event, and that was in Delhi conferences, not in the trains or these convoys. And secondly, again, after one had seen one or another, they were all alike. There was nothing very much that you could really kind of report. And my duties, in any case, were not in the field. I was a desk editor and preparing bulletins. Similarly, when Gandhi was shot, I was doing the bulletin that was to go on the air a few minutes later. And it's only after finishing that bulletin that I rushed across to Birla House where Gandhi was shot. But this is more on account of my own interest in it than my duty as a reporter or my duty in All India Radio. I'd finished the bulletin and then on gone.
So you were both a desk editor and an onlooker to some of these key events?
Yes, desk editor and onlooker. But I would say that onlooker also, much less on account of my duty than on account of my interest in those functions, those events. And in fact, after finishing the desk editor duty, I became a off-duty onlooker.
You mentioned you managed to get on one of the troop planes to Kashmir just as the military airlift was getting into full gear. How did a desk editor manage to get a...
Again, the same thing. I had no duty there. There's no part of my assignments. But I just decided to go and see it. And I persuaded someone to I knew people in the Air Force and people in the military who were being flown there. And in the 24 hours preceding, or rather 24 hours following the decision taken that troops will fly, the decision was taken on one morning, I forget the date, and by next morning, well before next morning, I'd been seeing aircraft flying over my house happened to be in the route, and I could see aircraft flying, which excited my interest even more, and I persuaded someone to take me.
So which airport did you go to?
The New Delhi airport.
Is it Palam?
No,
no. Willingdon?
Safdarjung, as we call it there. Yeah, Wellington.
And how did an off-duty reporter manage to get on a troop plane?
By knowing persons that one had been involved with them, met them, and and in fact, I wrote somewhere in my own kind of impressions of the day that it was easy. It was surprising to see how a bit of personal relationship with somebody whom you're known, you get to do something which otherwise you might seem impossible to do. And apropos of that, not connected to these events. This had happened to me even before the partition. I was in China from about near the end of 1944 to early 46, and my papers were supposed to follow my assignment, my reporting for assignment in China. And when I was coming away, I had no papers either to explain my being in China or the authority to come out. And I went to the airport and said to somebody, look, this is my flight, take me to China, to Delhi, Calcutta, just north of Calcutta. And they took me on board, and I said, I wrote there somewhere that it's strange how a little bit of personal contact, or not even contact, a personal appeal, you might say, and you get on board.
But when you went to Kashmir, do you know what roughly the date was? The airlift started on the 27th of October.
The airlift started on the 24th. It was about the 25th morning when the arrangements had started the same evening. The decision was taken in the morning. The arrangements were started in the evening. Aircraft began to fly in the course of the night. And then in the morning, when I was sitting in the lawn of my house, fairly early in the morning, you could see every now and again a plane flying off. So the excitement of the occasion was there, even though I was not on duty on covering it.
So you went on the first day, the first day?
No, early on the second day.
What did you see in Srinagar at the airstrip?
What was amazing to see was the aircraft landed. There was no time to go into the city at that time. Waited at the airport, and what was amazing to me was one had known by the time I left Delhi, one had known that at this informal cabinet meeting there had been first the formal cabinet meeting, then the informal consultations between the Indian members of the cabinet. The decision had been taken that troops will fly. In fact, the story that became known afterwards, and I think corroborated by Campbell Johnson in one of his accounts of it, that Mountbatten was opposed to this airlift. And Mountbatten had said, you take it from me as a man who knows war, that it's impossible to defend Srinagar airport with troops flying in by aircraft when the airport might be under threat. And it was Patel who said, they will fly. And it was Birla's Airlines, what is it then called? I forget the name. Birla's owned about the only airline that there was commercially being operated. He said, all my aircraft are at your disposal. And it was after that in the course of the evening, planes began to fly. And next morning I could see this happening. And knowing the story of the previous day, I was very anxious to try and go. So I went to Safdarjung, persuaded somebody to take me on, and there you are. Hello, how are you? So it's more a matter of not personal contact. I mean, I didn't know those people. I merely said I want to go.
So you stayed simply at the airstrip in Srinagar?
No, at the airstrip, and the plane that had gone there and with which I was to return was going to be there till the afternoon. So in the intervening hours, I just went into the city. There was nothing much happening there at that time that you could describe, that you saw this. But there was a great amount of tension. No events on the street, but a great amount of tension. And when this plane was due to leave, I got back to the airport and flew back.
Did you see any sign of the National Conference militia on the streets?
No, none at all. In fact, the militia, etc., it's partly a later story. that militia did this or that. There was no sign of that. What had happened, on the other hand, fortuitously but very luckily, was that there had been a casual tip-off by by a witness to the arrival of the invaders some 20 kilometers away from Srinagar, and it was his tip-off which led to the mobilizing of a small number of troops around the airport. But if the aircraft had not started arriving just as quickly as they did, there was no way that the airfield could have been saved.
Did you know any of the foreign correspondents who went up there? There was Bill Sidney Smith and Margaret Parton, Robert Trumbull.
Trumbull, yes, the American correspondent, yes. I knew Trumbull. Who else was there at that time?
There was Satpal Sahni was on the ground in Kashmir.
I didn't know him. Doon Campbell was not there, was he?
Doon Campbell, I've heard the name mentioned. Who did he work for?
Doon Campbell was with Reuter. Doon Campbell, and later I think he became general manager of Reuter. Doon Campbell had been in Delhi. I had known him a little bit in Delhi, but then we ran into each other again in China. Not again. In Delhi I knew him after I had known him in China. Doon Campbell was at that time a Burma War correspondent, and it was after by the time that independence came, he had not yet become general manager. That I think was a little later.
You were mentioning, I'm just wondering if I can just get some of this, ask you to repeat a little bit of what you were saying about when you got to know the Bedis in Delhi, B.P.L, Bedi and Freda Bedi. What manner of people were they?
As I said, B.P.L Bedi was a florid individual, physically as well as mentally, and a great conversationalist. Therefore, you never had a dull moment in a half hour sitting along with others where he happened to be too. This was so in Lahore as well, where I knew him before I met him in Delhi. And therefore, I wouldn't say that I knew him very well, but we knew each other. We were in the same kind of circle. He was much older than I was, senior. But I knew Freda a bit better.
Both leftists?
Both leftists. Both.
Freda, I've seen one rather bad photograph, but clearly she was striking in appearance.
She was. She was a strikingly... Again, I said it wasn't a beautiful person, but more a striking personality.
Why? What was striking?
What makes a person striking? For one thing, one knew that she was a very serious person. Serious in her pursuits of her interests. And second, the fact that she was neither Indian nor English, but somewhere from an unknown country added more to the mystery of her. But more than that, I would say that it was by her... She was in fact a force behind B.P.L. B.P.L probably would not have been able to do the sort of things he did had it not that Monday newspaper, there's Monday Morning, had it not been her persistent, steady work behind him.
Did you get the impression that they were disciplined communist cadre?
No, I didn't. And I doubt that they were. B.P.L was not a... B.P.L would not be a cadre person for any organization. He was too much of his own man.
And Freda?
She was a quiet individual. I said she was the disciplining force behind B.P.L.
Did you know Alice Fez in Lahore? Fez's wife, the English communist.
No, I didn't know. I knew Fez, but I didn't know the wife. The Tariq Ali, who is now in London, has been in London for a time. I knew his father and his father's brother.
Shaukat Hayat Khan?
Shaukat, no, not Shaukat. Was it Shaukat his father?
Well, he had an uncle called Shaukat Hayat Khan, but I'm sure he had quite a lot of uncles.
No. These were two brothers, Mazhar Ali and Mahmud Ali. And he is, I think, Mazhar's son, not Mahmud's son. And they were both senior to me in college, both Mazhar and Mahmud. But I knew them. And through them, I knew a lot of people who were in the leftist group. And I was, in fact, invited to join one of them. This is a group that used to meet once a week. And I was asked to, since I'm in the paper also, I was doing wartime reporting, so I was asked to come and explain my view of the war. And I was invited to leave the group because they were at that time demanding that a second front must be opened. And I said, no, that is now a mistake. It should have been opened a long while ago. But now that the Russians are getting close to Berlin, I don't think there should be a second front. Let the Russians come and capture Berlin. And because that was against the party line, I was invited to leave the group.
So this was a CPI group?
CPI. Well, it was, no, not, I wouldn't say that that the majority of them were CPI members, but they were all sympathizers. Both the professors with whom I had been closely connected during my college days were also members of the group. In fact, there's one of them who said, "Look, you're doing the wartime column, the war report in the paper every week. You come and join this group."
Who was that?
Frank Thakurdas. In fact, I think I don't know whether he's still around. He was in Delhi until a few years ago, just a few years ago.
Did you know Victor Kiernan?
Victor Kiernan I knew, yes. Victor Kiernan was a close friend of Thakurdas's, and I knew him quite well. I knew him more in his capacity as a writer than as a leftist.
And Daniel Latifi?
Daniel Latifi, yes. Daniel Latifi I knew here also, after the partition.
Khushwant Singh once told me that Daniel Latifi was the model for the communist in Train to Pakistan.
Could have been. But Daniel Latifi was again a very quiet worker. He was a serious person, not a flamboyant individual, and dedicated worker. Daniel Latifi was the better known in this Lahore group also. Victor Kiernan was not much into politics, either a student politics or the leftist politics of Lahore. But he was an intellectual.
And you translated Fez, of course?
Yes.
Thank you. I've